patients, people at home while we do the manual zooming.
okay.
It's so fancy. We have the fanciest
There I
equipment
am.
here. Here we go. All right, nicely framed up, and you can see people at home. And I'll keep an eye on questions in
Okay.
chat, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
If anybody has a question on chat, I can read it to you, so you can just focus on.
So first, I want to thank everybody for having me here today to talk to the Muleskinners at the first meeting of the year. As it was just explained, my name is Bill Ellis. I'm running for Associate Circuit Judge for Division 9 here in Boone County. And I want to thank you for inviting me to come and talk about my campaign with you. In order to discuss my campaign, I want to first just give you a little bit of context. First about myself, which is that I'm born and raised here in Boone County. I grew up here and attended Shepherd Boulevard Elementary and Jeff Jr. When I went, now I guess Jeff Middle, even though I still call it Jeff Jr. Hickman High School. I went to Mizzou for both college and law school. So I'm from here and have lived here since law school as well, and have kind of made this my home, and it's always been, and I really do love it here. I've been practicing as a lawyer for 25 years. I graduated law school in 2001, so this is my what is it, silver anniversary? I think it's your 25th anniversary, maybe. So this is it for me. And for the last 15 of those years, I've focused my practice primarily on juvenile law, and I think that that's important. Although I do several other practice areas as well, I think that juvenile is important because the context I think you need to know about Division 9 is that it's currently our juvenile court division here in Boone County. That means that Division 9, which is currently held by Judge Tracy Gonzalez, who's not running for re-election, handles all of the juvenile cases that are filed here in Boone County. And those cases include adoptions, child abuse and neglect cases where children are removed from maybe their parents' homes due to concerns about abuse and neglect in the home, as well as juvenile delinquency and children who commit law violations or alleged to have committed law violations that would be illegal for adults, just the same as they would be illegal for kids. Anything that would be illegal for an adult, robbing a bank, all the way down to I guess stealing or shoplifting or something. And so I think it's important to just kind of understand those things. I've had for the last 15 years, I've had a contract with the Boone County Circuit Court where I am regularly appointed by the court, by Division 9, to represent and advocate for the best interests of kids and sometimes parents with cases pending in juvenile court. And so I think that's important for you to kind of understand just going into what I want to tell you about my campaign. And I built my campaign around three core values that I believe are important for judges to focus on and to kind of guide them as they handle the cases that come before their courtrooms. And I think it's specific. I think that applies to Division 9, but I also think it applies to nearly any other kind of case or any other specific case you might be able to think of. And those three values that I think are important and that are kind of guideposts along the way are community, opportunity, and accountability. And I think that the best way for me to tell you how I believe those cases fit into the role of the judge and the role of the juvenile court and the jurisprudence that comes out of juvenile court is for me to tell you a story about a case that I handled in Division 9, a juvenile case, a few years ago. And I think that I can use that to maybe illustrate a little bit about my vision for the role of the Division 9 Associate Circuit Judge. And so I want to tell you a story about a case I handled, about a kid named Sally. I'm going to call her Sally. That's obviously not her real name. And I was appointed to represent her several years ago in Division 9. She was alleged to have committed a few different offenses. But first, I want to give you a bit of context about her. And Sally was, I believe, 14 when I was appointed to represent her. Her mother had died when she was very, very young. I don't believe she had any recollection of her mother. She was raised by a single dad, which I think is just kind of a little bit rare in and of itself. But nevertheless, I don't think that her case is so atypical that it wouldn't apply to, I think it has a broader application. So she was raised by a single dad. Her mom had died, and I think she was left with, understandably, a lot of trauma from that, a lot of heartache, and a lot of mixed up feelings that, frankly, kids aren't necessarily equipped to process through. I think the death of a parent would be hard for any of us, and I'm sure is hard for all of us. But again, when you're a kid and you don't have some of the skills that people develop over time, it's even harder. And I think her dad was doing the very best he could. I didn't have any concerns at all about his parenting. She had a very good, very diligent, very involved and loving father. And I think that, however, I think he was probably struggling too. He lost his spouse, and I think that's understandable. And I think as a result of not processing kind of some of the things that she had been dealing with, Sally started when she was much younger, before I knew her, where she had behavior problems and acting out at home and temper tantrums beyond an appropriate sort of age for that kind of thing, and so on. As she got older, her behaviors escalated, and by the time I was appointed to represent her, she was alleged to have been running away from home and shoplifting. It seemed like a relatively straightforward case. None of those are the worst things that come before any courtroom, or particularly in juvenile court. At the same time, they're the kinds of things that if we don't address or don't figure out, they can escalate into more serious and more concerning problems. And so Sally, very shortly after I was appointed to represent her, Sally continued to run away. And very quickly after I was appointed, she ran away, this time for much longer. Initially, it had been for, maybe just leaving for a few hours or sneaking out at night. Sometimes maybe she'd spend the night at a friend's house. But shortly after I was appointed, she ran away. She was contacted by an older man online, and he basically lured her into running away with him and took her to another state where he sex trafficked her for 3.5 months. She was gone. And she was eventually located after she and this man were in a car together, driving down the road in this other state, and the man became involved in a rolling gun battle with another guy driving down the street. And Sally was kind of caught in the crossfire and ended up being shot twice through the neck. She was life flighted to a hospital and kept in the hospital to recover. And once she had made enough of a recovery, she was discharged. She still had bandages on her neck and was still under a doctor's care, but she was returned here to Missouri and was returned to her father's home to be, for us to kind of address, next steps. We didn't get to address next steps because she ran away that same night. And this time with a different older man she had met online, who took her to a different state, but still sex trafficked her. That time she was gone for a few weeks before she was eventually located and returned. And when she was brought back that time, she was placed at the Juvenile Justice Center here in Boone County. And she was, frankly, I think Sally, understandably perhaps in her own way, viewed that as punishment. It was absolutely not intended to be a punishment. And the purpose of juvenile court is not to punish, but to advocate or try to figure out what the best interest and serve the best interest of the youth. But again, she was locked up at JJC, and I think viewed it as punishment, when in actuality it was really an effort to keep her alive, frankly. And this was a situation where we then, so getting her back here and keeping her at JJC where she can be, we at least know she's safe, doesn't end her case. And in fact, it kind of starts really what I think is the hardest part of the case, which is, what are we going to do about this? And so we've got a situation where Sally's somebody in our community, right? And she needs to, the court needs to figure out why she is making these self-destructive choices and behaviors, and how we can help her become a better and more productive person. The thing about that is that was hard to do. We had to have a lot of meetings and a lot of hearings to kind of figure out what the root of the problem was. And I think that ultimately, Sally, I think probably her behaviors were rooted in unprocessed trauma, maybe from her mom her mom's passing. I'm not equipped or qualified to make that determination. I'm not a psychologist, but certainly that would make sense, I think. But Sally, the thing about her is, and the thing about a lot of kids we deal with in juvenile court, she didn't want to necessarily make any changes. She didn't want to admit that there were any problems or any issues. And so she fought us every step of the way. Eventually, we were able to identify a placement that specializes in serving kids, young girls who've been sexually trafficked. And Sally was moved from JJC to this other placement. She ended up being at that other placement. She was at JJC for several months while we tried to figure out a place, which is longer than any kid should be kept there. But again, at the same time, the risks were too high, I think, for her to be placed anywhere else. She ended up going to this other place and was there for nearly a year in the place where they worked with her on sex trafficking, addressing her trauma from sex trafficking. During that time, the case goes on, and we have regular meetings, regular hearings about what should happen next in her case. And Sally is present for all of those. She was here in person for, I believe, for all of them. She might have been by video for some, but I think it's good for kids to come to court if that's something that they want to do, and they're of an appropriate age to do that. And so Sally would appear in court, and whenever she did, she continued to kind of minimize and deny the existence of her problems, blame others for them. Everyone in court, Judge Gonzalez, the other lawyers in the courtroom, the juvenile office who's present, we would always tell her, we support you. We care about you. We want the best for you. We want you to be healthy and happy and safe, and we're not going to give up on you. Sally didn't believe that her life had any meaning, that her life had any purpose, or that she had any value. I don't think she believed that anybody cared about her. And again, maybe that's an effect of losing a parent at a very early age. But we would always tell her that every time I met with her. I would say, listen, we just, everybody wants the best for you, and we're just trying to help you. We need you to, we want to help you make some changes. After months and months and months, Sally, I think, well, at first, as I said, Sally, I think, viewed this as punishment. Really, I think it was an opportunity for Sally to save Sally's life, frankly, and to improve Sally's life, and thereby, I think, improve our community. And I think eventually, when we told Sally, after enough times of telling Sally and showing her and being there every time and not yelling and not screaming and not telling her, that this was stupid, why did you do this? But telling her we cared, we only wanted the best for her, we're just trying to help her. Somewhere along the way, I think it clicked for her, and she realized that the court was being accountable to her, that we were always there. We were always telling her those things, that we weren't going to give up on her. And I think once she realized that, it really opened a door for her and really put her on the road to being able to address some of the root issues and some of the things that would impact her behavior. I'm happy to report that her story has a happy ending. I ran into her not terribly long ago, actually, at a grocery store, and I already was kind of aware of this, but I was able to talk to her and see it for myself when I was able to talk to her. I ran into her at a grocery store. She's been out of the residential placement, and I've been not involved in her case now for well over a year. But she she's graduated from high school. She is interested in becoming a therapist herself. She has taken to volunteering back at the residential placement that she went to before, helping other young girls, sharing her story with them and trying to help them understand, that there's a better way forward and that they have value and their lives have purpose and meaning. She eventually, she felt strong enough and safe enough that she actually cooperated with a prosecutor in Western Kansas and testified against the first guy who kidnapped her and trafficked her and helped secure his conviction. So, again, I've kind of alluded to them about the values of community and opportunity and accountability, but I think that, again, Sally's case demonstrates that. As far as community goes, I'm from here in Boone County. Like I said, born and raised. I care deeply about this place, and I know you guys do too, or else you wouldn't be here. And I think that our community, obviously, Sally is better. Sally's a member of our community, so that makes our community better, right? Well, I think that, not only does it make Sally better, and that improves our community, but let's think about the ripples in that splash, I guess there. Sally is better. That makes her dad better, right? He's doing better. They've got a better relationship. So there's two people. Sally's also mentoring these other young girls who've been through what she's been through. She's helping them. That makes them better. Not only is Sally in a better state of mind and better herself, not only is her relationship with her dad better, she's now in a much better state of mind to be a good parent for her own children when that time comes, if that's what she decides to do. So future generations are going to benefit from what Sally was able to achieve through juvenile court. I think that as far as opportunity, our court recognized that courts can be more than just places of punishment. They can be places of opportunity and assistance. Sally, I think, initially felt like being in juvenile detention was a punishment, and certainly, I can understand that in some way. But really, I think it was an opportunity to change the trajectory of her life. Ultimately, being in this place where she was able to get some help, and so I think that again, leaving her at JJC wouldn't have really changed anything. We would have kept her there, and maybe we would have eventually thought, well, we've taught her a lesson now. She's been there long enough. Let's turn her loose. I am 100% certain that wouldn't have changed. She would have likely run again. Something needed to be done to address the root issues so that this cycle doesn't keep repeating. But there can't be any opportunity without accountability. And as I said, Sally thought she was being punished. And I think that often we equate accountability is a term we hear a lot in the context of court cases. And how long should this person go to prison for to be accountable for what he's done? And so certainly that is one meaning of accountability. But I think that I also believe that Sally was denying and minimizing and blaming others for her issues because she knew if she was honest about those issues, the court would be compelled to do something about it, and the court would hold her accountable. And if the court is holding her accountable, that means everybody will know if she fails. And nobody wants to be seen or failing. It's a risk. Some of these kids, lots of kids, and frankly, lots of adults in the criminal system are they've grown up in a certain way, and change is different. Being in an unknown situation, even one that would seem better, is a lot of stress. They're not used to this. It's an unfamiliar environment, and sometimes that manifests as acting out, making bad choices. They're often more comfortable in dysfunctional or destructive situations. So I think the accountability, I think she had a fear of accountability, but I think that she wouldn't allow herself to be held accountable by the court or be accountable to the court unless and until the court first was accountable to her. And I think she had to eventually realize that these people are here for me. They do mean what they're saying. They do tell me they care. They are trying. They aren't giving up on me. It's okay to trust these people. It's okay to put out this effort and try to make the scary, hard changes that they're asking me to make and try to make myself a better person. And if I mess up, they're going to be here for me to help me get back on the right track. And so I think that the court's accountability to her is another important aspect of the accountability. Accountability in our courtrooms is not just from the defendant or the juvenile or the parties to the court and doing what the court orders them to do. The court has to be accountable to them, has to build that trust. If they don't trust the court, nothing's going to change. And I think that that's ultimately, another way the court can be accountable to people that come before the court is by protecting people's rights, enforcing the rule of law, appointing counsel when they're entitled to counsel, making sure that best interests are met, and always keeping your word and following through on the things you say you're going to do. Once people trust the court, they respect the court, and they'll buy in and do, I think, the things that need to be done. And in the end, we're back to community. That makes our community a better place. So, as I said, my experience has kind of taught me the value or the importance of these values as it relates to the court. I talked about it in the context of juvenile case because that's what Division 9 handles primarily. I am in juvenile court every day, almost every day anyway. And but I think these values apply in nearly any kind of case or any specific case you can think of. Our court's decisions can change the trajectory of a life, and that's what happened for Sally. And our community is better because of it. I think that the court was able to change her life. There aren't a lot of jobs out there where you can change somebody's life if you really think about it. But I think the juvenile judge, and particularly juvenile court judge, is one of them. I've been proud to be able to help be a part of that for quite a long time now, and I'm hopeful to be able to have the opportunity to continue to do that as the Division 9 Associate Circuit Judge.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer any questions you guys
I have
have.
a question. So if you're elected judge, you'll be an associate judge, and one of the responsibilities of the associate judge is not just to do juvenile court, but it's to oversee criminal cases as well. And if you're having preliminary hearings, are you familiar with what that is? In a criminal case, will you allow hearsaying? Can you commit on that?
I don't know that I can commit on that, I suppose. I think every case is different. Every case is.
That's not accurate. It's a rule of law. It's a question of law.
Sir,
You can't
be
commit.
respectful.
Yeah, we need to cool down.
No, I think that every case is different. Every case is fact specific, and I think that the nature of what is being offered or being spoken about, I don't know that I can give a yes or no. I don't believe that hearsay is reliable testimony. I think we all learned that in law school, and I also know that preliminary hearings, ultimately the finding of probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed is a somewhat lower bar in the sense of if it's not bound over to circuit court, it can be refiled. That doesn't mean they'll be willy-nilly in the decisions that the court makes. As I've said, the rule of law needs to be followed, and that the parties need to know that they're going to be treated fairly. And I think that, again, though, the ultimate outcome of what's the best way to proceed here depends on the case and the facts.
Okay, another question?
I just wanted to say, Tracy Gonzalez is an amazing human being, really amazing. I don't know if any of you.
Oh, we do.
She's incredible.
She's wonderful.
She's just wonderful. I spent 3 years at CASA volunteers in that experience.
Okay.
Seeing her in court.
I work with CASA every day. Yeah.
And what you were talking about is it's a completely different situation in the criminal court. I mean,
It is a lot different. At the same time, some of the constitutional protections that exist in criminal court, certainly most of the constitutional protections, really all of them, apply still in juvenile. And I think that's important. The right to counsel in situations, the Fifth Amendment rights, those sorts of things are all applicable still. The goal is different in that it's focused much more on rehabilitation, best interest of the person, rather than this offense results in this sentence. But I do think that kids do have constitutional rights that still must be enforced and protected.
Are there some questions online, Sarah?
Let's see. Nope, I've asked a couple times.
Okay, I can.
Well, let's see. Does anybody's hand up? I
I
don't.
can see some printing. I just didn't know.
No, yeah, it's not unrelated.
I don't see any hands
In
up.
the meantime,
I'm sorry.
that's interesting for this kind of race, let's call it, that you have for the Democratic primary. I understand that you cannot campaign against your opponent, and there are other things about this race that all the qualified lawyers who run for judgeships in Missouri, they follow a certain code of ethics that's very different from the other campaigns, where you certainly can campaign against your opponent. So do you want to say a little bit about how you explain that to people? What's different about running for a judgeship in Missouri
Versus maybe a Senate race or something.
It is important for candidates for judge to there are several codes of conduct, I guess, that lawyers and judges must follow. That frankly there isn't necessarily a code of conduct for people running for mayor or president or there are certain things that we would like to hope and expect our elected officials will follow, but not necessarily a written down set of values, I suppose. Meanwhile, for lawyers, we've got the code of professional responsibility. We've got the code of judicial conduct. We're not allowed to take political positions. We're not allowed to prejudge cases. I think that Kevin's question, to go back to his question a minute ago, is a question ultimately about law. But I think that there are, broad applicable, realities or unknowns that need to, are relevant to the inquiry. And I think that prejudging situations is really something that nobody wants a judge to do. If a judge were to do that, if I were to say, anybody that comes in my courtroom for murder is going to get, the death penalty or something, you're not going to want me to be the judge, and I shouldn't be, I think that it's important to make sure that you maintain that degree of impartiality, fairness, and decorum. And that's something that sometimes I think we are struggling with at times. And I think that it's important to always try to preserve that. I think that our courtrooms are the great deciders of things, and we try to keep the extra tangential kinds of things out of that. And so I think that, again, certain questions can't be answered. I can't take political positions. I do want to commit to upholding the rights and the rules that govern our courtrooms.
I would like my full 30 minutes.
Am I over? I'm sorry.
You will get it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize how over I go.
Okay, one more question. Then we'll.
Yeah, it's
Oh, it's all right.
it's not super important, but as a retired teacher, I'm really curious if your courts have avenues of connections with schools, and are there entities in schools that support? I mean, I've had students in my classroom that, I'm so troubled that.
I typically, not always, sometimes working with schools are certainly an important part. I mean, our kids, ideally, if they're in school, which they should be, they're with our kids often, as much as the parents are during the school year anyway. And certainly they have information to share and important perspectives to bring to the table. I talk with teachers a lot in both the abuse neglect cases, where perhaps I may be a guardian ad litem appointed to advocate for the child's best interest, but even also in the juvenile delinquency cases I might handle, where I would talk to the teachers about, is this something that happened at school? What is he on track to do? Is he on track to graduate? What are some things that he does have going for him? These cases are complex in that every decision you make has, again, rippling effects, and you have to kind of try to explore, if the court does A, B, or C, what's going to happen with X, Y, and Z? Is that going to have an effect on those things? And so certainly teachers have very important perspectives to share. And I very much value anytime teachers are involved in cases. I think that they're a very trusted and reliable source of input on cases.
Okay, I'm going to ask them to switch
thank you so much.
seats now.
Thank you.
Sorry for this.
That's okay.
And I hope that Spencer Smith, you don't have an appointment too quick after. We got started a little late.
Yeah, we're running about 4 minutes behind. But
Yeah.
we're doing all right.
So the second person who has presented for this judicial position is Spencer Smith. Please introduce yourself. Tell us anything you want about your campaign or philosophy.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone, and it's great to see such a good turnout for the first Muleskinners of the year. And it's an honor to be here and to be a part of the long history of Muleskinners that goes back to the 1960s. And so I appreciate the invite to be here to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Spencer Smith. I'm running for Associate Judge, Division 9. I grew up in Springfield, Oregon, which is close to the University of Oregon. My dad had a career as a logger and wanted to do something more with his life, and so we ended up moving as a family close to the University of Oregon, so he could register as a freshman at the age of 35. And I grew up with two older brothers and two younger brothers. And so looking back, I think that gave me some good experience mediating disputes. But my mom was a homemaker, and my dad was in college, and so we were reliant on food stamps, financial aid, and the generosity of others. And I'll never forget just moments like, being at the grocery store and my mom was, in line. And when you had food stamps back in those days, it wasn't the cool little debit card they have now. You really, got out the big book of stamps. And I just remember when, we would see, if we knew somebody behind us in the checkout line, just how, embarrassed she was about that. And I remember in the 8th grade when they made a policy where you had it went from sports were free to you had to pay $50 to be on the sports team. And when you have 5 boys and they all play multiple sports, that's a big deal. And I still remember the athletic director one day coming and getting me out of class to collect, and I was always setting up payment plans with them. And and at one point my older brother needed a public defender when he got in trouble because my family couldn't afford an attorney, and we needed the assistance of a public defender during that difficult time for us. And just the reason I share all that and give you a little bit about my background is I think those experiences greatly shaped my attitude towards public service. That's kind of where my passion comes from. And I experienced in a real palpable way, the importance of things like food stamps and other social services available to those that don't come from money. But my dad got through college and graduate school and became a public school teacher. And on a public school teacher salary, didn't stretch too far with 5 boys. And then my parents ended up having our youngest. They finally got a daughter when I was in high school. And so anyways, but my dad did whatever he had to do to keep a roof over our head and to put food on the table, whether that was doing side jobs or waiting tables, whatever he had to do. And I remember growing up, I had paper routes and I umpired little league baseball games, which I guess they say a judge's job is just to call balls and strikes. But ref basketball games. I worked at Hardee's in high school. And, I did those things so I could, have the clothes that the cool kids wear and be able to afford to, buy cleats and, a new baseball glove and things like that. But after graduating from high school, I wanted to go to college, but I couldn't afford it. It just seemed the amount of money it would have took for me to go to college just from where I was at in life just seemed overwhelming. So I joined the Navy to get the GI Bill, and my Navy enlistment was very unique and interesting. I of course went to boot camp, and then I went to storekeeper school in Meridian, Mississippi. And then I went to submarine school in Groton, Connecticut. and eventually I ended up on the USS Alabama in Bremerton, Washington. And when you get to a submarine and you're the new guy, they call you a nub. And it was explained to me that that's an acronym for non-useful body. There's also another tradition they had where the new guy spends the first 90 days washing dishes, 16 hours a day. So that was a lovely experience. Anyways, but another thing you have to do when you're stationed on a submarine is in your first year you have to become a qualified submariner. And for me, that was a very challenging, rigorous process because what's expected is that you have to have an understanding of every department on the submarine, whether it's sonar, understanding how a nuclear reactor works, understanding the protocols for, if we receive an order for a nuclear missile to be fired, electrical systems, and obviously I wasn't required to specialize in these areas, but it was required to, have a general understanding of how everything works. And part of that process is learning how to drive the boat as a helmsman or a plainsman. You're literally the person, the guy with your hand on the steering wheel. So being new to the boat and doing that was it was intimidating at first, but it was a good experience for me. Everyone on the submarine was also required to be trained as a firefighter because there's no firefighters on a submarine. If something happens, that's training that everyone needs. And so I was required, to know where every fire extinguisher was. And I remember there was this drill where you put on a mask and you have to find where to plug it in to get oxygen. And apparently they don't do that anymore because there was some disaster where somebody passed out because they couldn't, find where to put the tube to get oxygen. Anyways, I digress. But, the last step of becoming a qualified submariner is you have what's called a final board. And in that board, there's an officer, the lead mechanic, and another department head that kind of grills you on everything you're supposed to know. So I stood there for 6 hours and, they just really grill you on everything. And I was proud to pass on my first try and was awarded my silver dolphins. And back then they also had this wonderful tradition where you put the silver dolphins on your chest and everybody on the boat comes and punches the silver dolphins as hard as they can. I don't think they do that anymore either. But anyways, what happened was my boat went into the shipyard to be upgraded to a different class of submarine. And so that process took about 3 years for civilians to work on it. And so the captain was trying to figure out what to do with all these sailors that no longer have a boat to work on. And there was something called the Individual Augmentee Program, where sailors would deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan to be prison guards or drive Humvees. And basically the idea was do jobs that sailors were capable of doing. So the infantrymen could go out and do infantry stuff. But so I was young and dumb and wanted to impress my buddies back home. So of course I volunteered to go to Afghanistan. That was also an interesting experience for several reasons. For one, the small base that I was on in Assoc, Afghanistan, there were about 20 different organizations working together on that base. And, you know, this included USAID, the National Guard, Army Reserve, Special Forces, Navy Reserves. The local Afghan Army was there because one of our responsibilities was training them, and several other organizations that I forgot about because this was a while ago. But we built schools, bridges, and our mission was to build trust with the local villagers. And eventually, at one point, I was assigned to supervise 5 National Guard infantrymen at an outpost in the mountains outside the base, because technically I outranked them. However, so here I am in a situation, I'm a Navy guy, a submariner, and I'm supposed to be in charge of, 5 infantrymen. And so I had to earn their trust and respect through my actions by, demonstrating professionalism, discipline, and courage. And one thing that was valuable about that experience is I learned the best way to lead is to model the behavior that you want others to emulate. And so that was a good experience for me. Just on a side note, at one point, a bunch of heads of state from Washington, D.C. came to the base, and one of those individuals was John Kerry. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but he was actually assigned. We were kind of all anticipating because we were going to drive him around the village, and we were curious which heads of state are going to be in which Humvees. And I got assigned to drive John Kerry around. And so I spent an afternoon driving John Kerry around in a Humvee in Assoc, Afghanistan. And I'll never forget looking at the mirror and seeing John Kerry in the back seat with the Kevlar helmet on. There's just certain things in life you'll never forget. But anyways, I got out of the military. I went back home and enrolled at Lane Community College, and took advantage of my GI Bill and took about every course they offered, and history, political science, philosophy, psychology, sociology, essentially anything that didn't require math. But eventually I transferred to Portland State University, and eventually I did have to take math to get my bachelor's degree, and earned a bachelor's of science in social science. And during college, one of the things I did is I spent all my free time at the courthouse observing jury trials and hearings. I talked to one of my professors, and he recommended, if you're interested in becoming a lawyer, you should just go to the courthouse. It's open to the public, and you should observe what lawyers do. And so after getting my bachelor's degree, I attended Washburn Law in Topeka, Kansas. At the time, I didn't know the animosity between Kansas and Missouri, so I found that out, real quick. But so forgive me. But I attended Washburn Law because in Topeka, Kansas, housing was cheap and tuition was affordable, and it was a good fit for me. I volunteered at the public defender's office while I was in law school. And one thing I did was what was called intake, where before the attorney met with the client, I would get some, basic information from the client, things a lawyer doesn't have to do, like date of birth, social security number. And I'll always remember one of the questions was the highest level of education you've attained. And I was surprised that, I mean, almost none of the clients that we represented had graduated from high school. And looking back, there was only one client that graduated from college out of the hundreds of people I did intake for. So that was just a real eye-opening experience. I was able to get a student practice license my third year of law school, and I worked at the Johnson County District Attorney's Office in Olathe, Kansas. And I was actually able to try 7 cases before I graduated from law school. And so after that, my thought was always after law school, I'm going to, go back home to Oregon. But before that happened, one of my buddies in law school said, you got to come play this new game called pickleball. Like, I'm telling you, I think you're going to like it. I'm like, and he's like, there's a tournament this weekend. It's this 4th of July. It started at like 7 a.m. and it was a Tuesday. And of course I committed to it. And then when my alarm went off on Saturday at 6 a.m., I was having second thoughts. But anyways, I ended up getting partnered up with my future mother-in-law. I don't know why. She ended up inviting me to her 4th of July party. And I met my future wife there. And so I guess pickleball serves a purpose after all. And so anyways, got married, went back home, and we had our firstborn Henry, and then we got pregnant with another one, and she wanted to be closer to mom and dad, and they wanted to be closer to the grandkids and their daughter. And I'm kind of leaving out, after I went back to Oregon, I worked as a deputy district attorney for a couple years, and built a lot more jury trial experience. And really the reason I went that route is the area we were living in, there just weren't any openings for public defenders, because they actually pay public defenders pretty well in Oregon, and so there's not as many openings there. But anyways, when there was an opening for a public defender, I took that job, and about 2 weeks later, some news stories started coming out about this new virus going around called COVID-19. And so I spent the next year and a half going to court with a mask on, and we all know that dark chapter. But I'll just, certain things you never forget. I had 2 jury trials as lead counsel during the height of COVID, and they had the jury spread around throughout the entire courtroom to create as much space as possible. We're making arguments through our masks, and it was like for a misdemeanor trespass. And it's like one of those moments where it's like, what are we doing here? But anyways, so I interviewed via Zoom with Dan Knight and Jessica Caldera, and got hired on the spot. And I just remember how welcoming this community was to me when I arrived. And I've just really grown to love Mid-Missouri. And, one of the things about not, growing up here and spending my whole life here is I've lived, all over the world and a lot of different places. And so I know what a gem this community, really is. And so anyways, I got to the prosecutor's office. Within the first year, about half the prosecutors left the office. And so kind of immediately, I just had to jump in, and I started handling murder cases. Pretty much right away. My caseload was violent crimes. I handled a couple mass shootings and just, some of the most serious crimes you can imagine. I handled DWIs, which resulted in fatalities. And, when you're sitting across from a mom or a dad that just lost their son or daughter, just hours prior, it changes your perspective, how you see things. I also worked in treatment court, and I've seen the value of individuals getting engaged in recovery. A lot of people that end up in the criminal justice system, it's because they're in that cycle of addiction. And when you see them able to break free from that, it's inspiring, and it shows you, just like Mr. Ellis mentioned, that, hammering people and, sending them to jail, sometimes it's a short-term fix. But, getting people in recovery a lot of times is going to set them up for success long term. I gained, a lot more jury trial experience at the prosecutor's office. I was there for about 2.5 years, and then went into private practice for a couple years, and absolutely hated it because my heart is really in public service. And that's why I interviewed at the Columbia Public Defender's Office, where I currently work. And one thing I've had to do throughout my life is adapt to new and unfamiliar situations, whether that is on a submarine in the mountains of Afghanistan, or working as a public defender or a prosecutor. I've always had a job where I had to adapt and be quick on my feet. One thing I want to make clear and communicate to everybody here is whoever is elected the Division 9 judge, we don't know what kind of cases they're going to get. When there's a vacancy, like for instance, when Judge Morrill was Division 11 and got elected as circuit judge, and Judge Pearman came in and took over Division 11 because Judge Pearman had a lot of family law experience. The caseload got shifted around, and she handles primarily family law, and the criminal cases went elsewhere. Even when Tracy Gonzalez got elected to Division 9, she didn't start out doing juvenile. She had a passion for juvenile, but Judge Schneider had seniority over her. And so, Judge Gonzalez had to wait her turn to do juvenile work until Judge Schneider retired. The short story is, the way it works, ultimately it's up to the presiding judge how cases are assigned. And before I decided to run for associate judge, I took the time to sit down with the presiding judge and discuss with him the job description and just how cases are distributed when a new associate judge is hired. And I'll never forget, he's like, well, Spencer, you're a military man, you know how it works when you're the new guy at any organization. You take the stuff no one else wants, and whether that be landlord, tenant, or restraining orders. Every case is different. And so, whoever is elected, whether it's myself, Mr. Ellis, or Mr. Egan, we're going to have to be quick on our feet, and we're going to have to be able to adapt to, new and unfamiliar situations. And I think it's noteworthy that Judge Gonzalez, before she was elected, she got her experience as a public defender and a prosecutor. Generally, I'm not going to say it's the best path, but being a prosecutor or a public defender is the most common path people take before becoming a judge. And so the reason I'm running for associate judge is my commitment to public service. I've defended democracy on board the USS Alabama. in the mountains of Afghanistan as a prosecutor and a public defender. And it's important now more than ever to have courageous judges to defend democracy in our judiciary, because we have to remember, I mean, there's three branches of government. And you know, the judicial branch, one of the jobs of a judge is to, you know, be a check on the other branches of government. You know, all the rights that were guaranteed in the Constitution, you know, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to vote, you know, all of those things are meaningless if we don't have, you know, good judges that, you know, have the backbone to uphold the rule of law. So we all have to do our part to live in a healthy democracy, and I'm asking for your vote to allow me to serve you by protecting your rights and upholding the rule of law. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate you having me.
And if you do have the time, we'll take a few questions
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, so to clarify, there are actually 3 people running for 1 seat on the bench. It's an associate position.
That's correct.
Only one. Okay.
Well, there's 2. Division 11 is open. The only candidate that's announced for that is Roger Johnson, the elected prosecutor. And one thing the presiding judge did communicate is, because Roger Johnson is the elected prosecutor, he's going to have to conflict out of any criminal cases. And so there will be a huge need for someone with expertise in criminal law.
And so the difference between 9 and 11 is what?
There is none. Division 9, for associate judge, Division 9 is a person. Division 11 is a person. As far as how cases are distributed, that constantly changes when new judges are appointed or elected, because every attorney has different background. It wouldn't make any sense to have somebody that spent their entire year or their entire career doing, you know, family law, you know, do another area of law they're unfamiliar with. That's why I mentioned when Judge Pearman took over Division 11, Division 11 did mostly criminal law, because Stephanie Morrill, Judge Morrill, had a background in criminal law. But then when Judge Pearman took over, it switched to family law. And there's a variety of factors. You know, the senior judges give their input to the presiding judge, but it's really confusing, the division thing. But I really think the best way to think about it is a division is a person.
We have a question here on the internet.
Go for it, Herb.
Yes. Can I ask a question of political philosophy? Judicial philosophy would be more appropriate, but it's skimmed over. It came to mind this week due to events in Minneapolis. It also concerns a juvenile. The case at hand that comes to mind is an old one in English common law taught in every law school that I know of. It is the case of Regina versus Dudley and Stevens. If that probably rings a bell with you. I wonder what you take from Dudley and Stevens that would inform your thoughts and actions today.
Unfortunately, the Missouri rules of ethics for judicial campaigns prohibit me from answering that question. I would love to, but just that the rules of ethics prohibit me from getting into that.
Do you agree?
I'll go a step further and say I don't remember that case off the top of my head. I do want to say hi to Professor Tillema, though. He was one of my professors in college. He probably doesn't remember me, but yeah, I don't remember that case.
Well, that's a professor getting it from the students.
Yeah, he didn't ask questions that hard in college.
He always has juicy questions.
You might want to look it up.
I appreciate you talking about how your personal experience, your personal life experience affect your perspective in the work that you do? I'm actually writing a memoir on my own experience. I was not a judge or anything, as a sociologist, but I think that's interesting. And your credit, the guy who spoke before mentioned his life experiences too, you know? And I think that's just great. I just wanted to clap or say something nice that both of you did this. So
Thank you, Dave.
Great.
So I want to follow up then. When can we have, or how can we have a conversation about those judicial rule, the ethics you're required to campaign by? Because at some point it turns into the absurd insult to the public when appointees to the Supreme Court or to appellate courts, when asked, is Roe v. Wade, are you going to respect stare decisis precedent? And they, well, I can't speak on that because the XQ maybe come before the court again. Or there have actually been a few of those nominees who have said, I really can't say that I'll respect Brown versus Board of Education because the issue may come before the court again. At some point, that ethics is an insult to my intelligence. And somebody telling me that they might very well be a fascist.
Any comment?
No, I understand. I understand your concern, and I do think it would be worth having a conversation just to educate everybody on what the Missouri rules of ethics are when it comes to judicial races and kind of where the line is. It's kind of interesting that, you run as a Democrat or Republican, but then the judicial canon says you're not allowed to engage in any political activity. So,
Just a point of information: is Mr. Egan standing on the Republican side, or do you know?
yes, he will be
Okay,
running as a Republican.
Okay. So
Well,
there probably will be.
I apologize to both of you if you think that this is too current. The case of Dudley and his brethren is 1884.
1884. I will go ahead and ask, because I thought it was an interesting question, your reaction to the question on hearsay being used in preliminary trials, especially. I think it's fair to give you
it's really interesting because before I came to Missouri, in Oregon, they write down all the rules of evidence. And I was like, well, I'm going to be a lawyer in Missouri. I need to find the rules of evidence. And they're found in case law. And so they're not actually necessary. They're found some places. There's some Supreme Court rules, but I practiced all over the state. In Miller County, they allow hearsay, or they don't allow hearsay at prelim. In Boone County, they allow one layer of hearsay. So a witness would be allowed to say, an officer could testify, the alleged victim said X, Y, and Z, but the officer wouldn't be able to say, the alleged victim said that this guy said that. That's anyways, that's about all I can say. That's the customary practice in Boone County. But is practicing all over the state. Every single county treats hearsay at preliminary hearings differently.
Question from David.
I got called out, so I might have missed it already, but maybe both of y'all can address and clarify. I had heard that candidates for judge are not allowed to ask for donations. Is that correct? And that people can give to you, but you're not allowed to actually say, yeah, donate to my campaign. Is that?
My understanding is you can in writing. Is that correct?
You're not allowed to. Is it okay? It's my understanding. I hope Spencer will agree with me on this, that they really could make these rules a little bit more clear. But I will say that my understanding and my interpretation is you are not allowed to solicit donations first on courthouse grounds from anybody. But second of all, you're not allowed to solicit donations in person from anyone likely to appear before you in court, although you could solicit donations in writing.
Yeah, and I also called, I actually asked the same question because my question was, does that include, does in person mean over the phone? And so I called the Judicial Office of Disciplinary and Retirement, and they're like, that's a good question. Let me get back to you. They're like, and then they said, no, absolutely not. And so after that, I hired Bailey over here as my campaign manager, and so I'm going to have
She does all the
no, I finally have somebody that can ask.
So you have somebody you can fire.
Traditionally, all the people who have run for judges have to make sure it's clear, do not, even at their fundraisers, ask for donations. They have someone else do it for them.
Yeah, well, and if as a follow-up to that, we'll make sure we have contact information for both of you. Pam will include that in our announcement, so anyone who wants to contribute, we won't be asking specifically, but the word will be out there.
I get back to Dave Rachel's question, and these people were all running for positions that require them to be lawyers, practicing or at least licensed, and so they're used to dealing with these slippery rules all the time and trying to uphold a code of ethics. It turns out maybe at other levels of our political establishment, there are no rules and there are no ethics. So at least they're trying at their level. You have something here online, right?
About a question?
Yeah,
I think we're good. That was just me typing other people's questions.
other people's
I think
questions.
we're all caught up with folks on Zoom land.
Okay, anybody else? Well, then we will probably have a bit of a discussion here about the current affairs when we go through our announcements. But so you're welcome to stick around. This has been a wonderful session with our guests today, and we thank them. Thank you. Give you about 3 minutes to clear out, go to the bathroom, get a cookie, and then we'll
Give this to the person who's asking for questions to be.
Thank you.